Heroic stories have essentially existed since the dawn of time, and whether it's mythology, comic books, or the larger-than-life heroes we admire on screen, all great hero stories, I mean the ones that really tend to permeate pop culture and live on for decades, seem to have one thing in common, and that's a great villain. And there's a few special occasions where a villain will steal the show and become the most engaging part of a movie. But how and why does this happen?
In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
One of my favorite quotes about heroes and villains is they all come from the same backstory of pain. The big difference is what they do about it. The villain says, the world hurt me and I'm gonna hurt it back. A hero says, the world hurt me and I don't want it to hurt anyone else. I love when movies dive into that parallel because when it's done right, it makes you make that subconscious choice about whose motives and philosophy you agree with more. And the audience is always going to pick the character that best represents their worldview, which means some people are going to tend to gravitate more to the villain. You could argue that that's simply because the hero is boring in the movie or the villain is just more interesting, but I don't believe that to necessarily be true. However, I do think you run the risk of having the hero be a little less interesting if what they want to do isn't only hard to do, but hard to want to do. Let me explain.
How do you think your ancestors got these? You think they paid a fair price? Or did they take it like they took everything else?
A lot of people didn't seem to really be able to engage with the movie deeper than the surface level. Which on the surface level, it's a typical Marvel movie, right? It's a story about a hero's journey with some cool effects and dope fight scenes here and there. But there's also a lot of deep-rooted themes in this movie that comment on the Black experience. So much so that I don't blame anybody who wasn't quite able to catch it.
The Black Panther told this very powerful and affecting Black story, or really I think a story about the Black experience, about the Black psyche. People went in expecting a superhero movie, and what they got was an examination of Black colonial trauma, Black generational trauma, internal Black class struggle, Pan-Africanism, and a somewhat cloudy vision for the future. Most people were not ready for this when they went in. And if this description of the movie doesn't make sense to you, Black or otherwise, you probably missed a lot of it.
See, ironically, we admire villains for the same reasons we admire our heroes. Pain being one of those tangible feelings. We see and feel T'Challa's pain on his introduction, after the death of his father, along with that rage and that thirst for revenge. And if anything, Killmonger is the walking physical embodiment of pain and trauma and anger.
Hey, Auntie.
And to add fuel to the fire, his very existence clashes with the idea of a place like Wakanda. It clashes against the idea that you can have all of the resources in the world at your fingertips that could end the suffering of so many people, yet you choose to sit on your hands. Killmonger's existence is a threat to T'Challa's entire worldview, even down to his love and respect for his father and the rest of his ancestors, because in this movie we find out that T'Chaka killed Killmonger's dad in cold blood and left him to be an orphan.
I found my daddy with Panther claws in his chest. You ain't the son of a king, you a son of a murderer.
Some real sins of the father type shit. Like I said earlier, we don't want our heroes to do something that's just hard to do. We want them to also do something that's hard to want to do. It may be hard to save the city of Wakanda, but it's definitely not hard to want to do. And that's why Killmonger was the perfect villain. That's why he was perfectly set up to be the main vessel. T'Challa took a back seat in this because he's pretty much the audience surrogate, taking in and processing the information the same way that we are watching him on the screen. Our challenges are what tell us who we really are inside. And Killmonger challenged everything T'Challa's ever known. His entire world has been turned upside down. He's questioning and struggling with the idea of keeping on with tradition and respecting his ancestors, or progressing and moving forward in a way that could be better.
You know where I'm from. When Black folks started revolutions, they never had the firepower or the resources to fight their oppressors. Where was Wakanda?
With that being said, there's also a lot of irony in Killmonger as a character. Although we understand, empathize, and maybe on some level agree with him, he plans to use the same forceful tactics that were used on his ancestors. He's not necessarily seeking a revolution the way he frames it, but he just wants people to pay. It gives him this level of complexity that you can't help but be enamored by. Being such a sympathetic villain makes him primed to be the driving force of this story, but I would also argue that he simply is because we needed him to be to push the story of Black Panther forward. T'Challa's been stuck ever since his father's death, and while it's very unfortunate that it took something this major to happen to finally get him some clarity, it definitely did.
How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
Batman is my favorite fictional character of all time, and it's not just because he knows hundreds of different fighting styles, but it's because his very existence poses so many questions. Like, is the approach that he's taking the right approach? I mean, he has billions of dollars. Would his money be best suited to helping out the city of Gotham in a more conventional way? And most importantly, is he doing what he's doing because he actually wants to help people, or is this just some cathartic thrill chase, living out the revenge fantasy of stopping his parents' killer? Villains seem to take the lead in a lot of Batman stories more than almost any other comic book hero. It happened a lot in the Batman animated series, Batman Returns, the most recent Batman Caped Crusader, as well as this film, The Dark Knight. And I believe it's because Batman has been known to be such a psychologically tattered character that his villains are often used to question his philosophy, his motives, and sometimes even the lies that he tells himself. And no one questions that better or more than the Joker.
So you think Batman's made Gotham a better place? You see, this is how crazy Batman's made Gotham. You want order in Gotham. Batman must take off his mask and turn himself in.
People love the Joker in The Dark Knight because Heath Ledger's performance was iconic. I mean, the voice, the walk, the mannerisms, and the overall feeling of just being a straight up menacing badass was super captivating. There's people who've made entire careers off of doing imitations of him. His thrilling performance on top of Heath Ledger's eerie death for sure elevated the Joker's stance in pop culture, but it's also because of the way he was portrayed in this film. Unlike Killmonger to T'Challa, the Joker is far less sympathetic. They play with some elements of making him sympathetic, but we never even get a real backstory on why he has his scars. We get multiple iterations of that.
He comes at me with the knife. Why so serious? I just want her to know that I don't care about the scars. So, I stick a razor in my mouth and do this.
But in a very similar fashion, the Joker is definitely the antithesis of Batman. The Joker wants chaos, Batman wants order. Batman wants to save lives in order to give people meaning, and the Joker thinks life is meaningless. And most importantly, we're all one bad day away from snapping, and we'll definitely get more into that in a minute. Even the situations where the Joker was proven to be wrong in Bruce's eyes were still sort of bittersweet because they proved his point anyway. People will steal and kill and justify all of their actions, especially if they have the authority to do so, proving it's not some moral code or compass that keeps people doing the right thing, but it's the system and the government and the powers to be. He's obsessed with making people see who they really are. He believes everyone is like him on the inside.
Those men on that boat, they made their choices. They chose to murder and steal. Doesn't make any sense for us to have to die too.
As to where Batman believes there is some good in all of us. They essentially are the classic yin and yang. As the Joker would put it,
You complete me.
Now, if there's a film that comments on the idea that heroes and villains are the same, but they just differ by their responses to the world, then The Dark Knight is definitely that. Batman and the Joker were essentially born from the same system, and the bare existence of Batman himself is an acknowledgement that that system doesn't work. The Joker isn't driven by money or power or some personal gain. He only wants to create chaos and anarchy. But ironically, he's not very chaotic. He seems that way, but he's actually a maniacal and very well thought out villain. He's sort of like a maestro carefully conducting his masterpiece, essentially using the city of Gotham as well as Batman's so-called moral code to test out his theory. Although I would argue that Batman is still the central character in this film, he definitely takes a little bit of backseat to the Joker here. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it's because what he wanted to do in this movie wasn't very hard to want to do. He wanted to stop the Joker, but it's not hard to want to stop him. He's a lunatic. He wants order and peace, which is hard to get, but it's not hard to want to get it. And with that being said, I would also argue that that was a very purposeful choice by Nolan and the writers. Batman as well as Harvey Dent in this film are almost noble to a fault. And it uses Batman and Harvey Dent to show the difference between nobility for a cause and nobility for the benefits of being noble. Harvey Dent was the Joker's headshot to Batman's philosophy, in my opinion. And if anything, he's the main case study to prove the Joker's point to be true. Harvey was literally called the White Knight. He's getting married to Bruce Wayne's girl that he was in love with. The public loves him. And in almost every frame we see Harvey in before his accident, he's almost altruistically noble. But once he gets in a position where his nobility didn't give him the benefit in a positive way, he snaps. And unfortunately, he ends up having to die at the end of the film. Batman has to take blame for everything that Harvey did because him and Gordon both agree that the city of Gotham and society as a whole would not be able to handle it if they knew that even the best of us, even our city's White Knight, could fall from grace and lose it after just one bad day. If he could do that, then any of us could, proving there's at least some truth to the Joker's point. So to answer the question of why or how does this happen, like how can you go to the theaters expecting a movie about a hero and leave feeling like the villain was the most engaging part of the story? How can you leave a movie even slightly agreeing with a murderer or a terrorist? It has nothing to do with how well they can fight. It has everything to do with how well they get our heroes to question why they're heroes in the first place. And most importantly for us in the audience, the best villains leave us to ask the question, regardless of how we feel about their actions and motivations, were they right?